The twin booms sliced through monsoon clouds over New Guinea like steel talons, their distinctive silhouette casting shadows that Japanese pilots had learned to mock. Lightning bolts painted on aluminum fuselages caught the tropical sun as 16 P-38s dove from 28,000 feet, their Allison engines screaming a death song that would echo across the Pacific for 3 years. This is the story of how American engineering shattered Japanese supremacy in the skies above the world's largest ocean. Hey everyone, before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. If you're enjoying this deep dive into aviation history, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from the Second World War. April 4th, 1942. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The humid air shimmered with aviation fuel fumes and the metallic tang of aluminum heating under the Solomon Islands sun, while mechanics wiped sweat-soaked hands on canvas coveralls as they watched the strangest fighter aircraft they had ever seen taxi across coral-dusted runways. The P-38 Lightning had arrived in the Pacific Theater not as a warrior, but as a spy. Lieutenant Colonel Boyd Wagner climbed down from the cockpit of his twin-boomed aircraft, his flight suit dark with perspiration from the un-air-conditioned cockpit that regularly reached 120 degrees during tropical missions. The Lightning's radical design drew curious stares from ground crews accustomed to conventional single-engine fighters. 2 engines, 2 booms. A central pod containing pilot and guns suspended between them like some aeronautical insect. Looks like it was built backwards, muttered Staff Sergeant Mike Kowalski, a line chief from Detroit who had worked on P-40 Warhawks for 8 months. The P-38's tricycle landing gear, twin vertical stabilizers, and pusher-puller propeller configuration violated every assumption about fighter aircraft design. 3,000 miles northwest, in a briefing room at Rabaul Airfield, Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai studied reconnaissance photographs of the new American fighter with professional interest and barely concealed amusement. The twin-boom configuration struck Japanese pilots as awkward, ungainly, the product of a nation that prioritized industrial efficiency over aeronautical elegance. American engineering, Sakai remarked to his squadron mates, his 64 victories making him one of Japan's most experienced pilots. They build fighters like they build automobiles, crude but functional. The laughter that rippled through the briefing room carried the confidence of men who had dominated Pacific skies for 4 months. Since Pearl Harbor, Japanese fighter pilots had swept Allied aircraft from the sky with methodical precision. The Zero's maneuverability, climb rate, and range had proven superior to every Allied fighter encountered. Why should this twin-engined oddity prove different? From August 10th to 15th, 1942, that confidence would begin to crack. The first combat engagements revealed something disturbing about the Lightning that reconnaissance photographs couldn't capture. Speed. At altitude, the P-38 could outrun any Japanese fighter, diving away from combat when the situation turned unfavorable, then climbing back to altitude faster than pursuing Zeros could follow. Flight Petty Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, Japan's leading ace with 87 confirmed victories, encountered his first Lightning over Bougainville on August 12th. His after-action report, discovered in Imperial Navy archives in 1953, described an aircraft that defied Japanese tactical doctrine. The twin-engine fighter refuses to engage in turning combat. It attacks in high-speed passes, fires concentrated bursts from 4 machine guns and 1 cannon, then climbs away before we can respond. When we pursue, it simply flies faster than we can follow. 4 50-caliber machine guns and one 20-millimeter cannon, all mounted in the nose cone, created a cone of destruction that no Japanese aircraft could survive. Unlike wing-mounted guns that required pilots to calculate convergence points, the Lightning's concentrated firepower struck exactly where the pilot aimed. But Japanese pilots adapted quickly. They learned to attack Lightnings during takeoff and landing when the American fighters were most vulnerable. They developed tactics to exploit the P-38's perceived weaknesses. Its size made it easy to spot. Its twin engines created a larger target profile, and surely such a heavy aircraft couldn't match the Zero's legendary maneuverability. What they didn't understand was that Lockheed engineers had created something unprecedented in aviation history. A fighter aircraft with bomber-like range, heavy bomber firepower, and pursuit plane performance. The Lightning could fly farther, hit harder, and run faster than any single-engine fighter in the Pacific. Flight logbook entry, Lieutenant Richard Bong, September 3, 1942. P-38 handles like a dream at altitude. Zeros can't touch us above 20,000 feet. Today, we're the hunters. By September 1942, General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, was requesting additional Lightning squadrons with an urgency that surprised Pentagon planners. His cables to Washington described an aircraft that was changing the character of air combat in the Southwest Pacific. The mathematics were becoming undeniable. Lightning squadrons were achieving kill ratios of 4-to-1 against Japanese fighters, numbers that reversed every tactical assumption about Pacific air combat. American pilots who had spent months flying defensively in inferior aircraft were suddenly dictating the terms of engagement, yet the Japanese high command remained confident that superior pilot training and tactical doctrine would overcome American technological advantages. After all, Bushido spirit had proven more valuable than mechanical superiority in every previous engagement. They had no idea what was coming. November 16, 1942. Buna Airfield, New Guinea. Intelligence officers intercepted a Japanese radio transmission that would have chilled Imperial Navy pilots if they had understood its implications. A single squadron of P-38 Lightnings had just destroyed an entire formation of Japanese bombers without losing a single aircraft. The sky was about to rain fire and bodies, but first it would rain something even more devastating to Japanese morale: the wreckage of their most precious strategic asset. The radio crackled with desperate Japanese voices as formations disintegrated above the Bismarck Sea. Twin-boomed silhouettes carving through bomber streams like wolves among sheep. Below, oil slicks spread across azure waters, where once proud Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers had kissed the Pacific, their crews never understanding how American fighters had appeared so far from any known base. The Lightning's 1,000-mile combat radius was rewriting the strategic map of the Pacific, making nowhere safe for Japanese aircraft. January 15, 1943. Wewak Airfield, New Guinea. The stench of aviation gasoline mixed with rotting jungle vegetation hung thick in the pre-dawn air, while maintenance crews worked by flickering torchlight to patch bullet holes in Zero fighters that had barely limped home from their latest encounter with American twin-engine devils. Flight Petty Officer Tetsuzo Iwamoto counted 17 holes in his aircraft's wing fabric, each one a reminder of how close concentrated 50-caliber fire had come to ending his war permanently. The P-38's nose-mounted armament created destruction patterns that Japanese pilots had never encountered. Wing-mounted guns on Zeros and Oscars required careful aim to achieve convergence at specific distances. Miss the convergence point, and half your bullets flew harmlessly past the target. But Lightning pilots simply pointed their aircraft at the enemy and pulled the trigger. 4 50-caliber machine guns and one 20-millimeter cannon firing from the same focal point created what American pilots called the buzzsaw. The concentration of firepower could saw a zero in half with a 2-second burst. Combat Report, Lieutenant Thomas Lynch, 39th Fighter Squadron, February 7, 1943. Engaged 12 zeros over Rabaul. Lightning's firepower advantage decisive. Enemy aircraft disintegrated under concentrated nose guns. No American losses. At Henderson Field, maintenance crews discovered something that sent chills through Japanese intelligence networks. Lightnings were returning from combat with battle damage that would have downed any single-engine fighter. Holes through wing, booms, shattered canopies, damaged control surfaces. Yet the twin-engine design provided redundancy that kept pilots alive and aircraft flying. Captain Rex Barber examined his P-38 after a February mission over Bougainville, counting 37 bullet strikes from a zero that had caught him in a climbing turn. One engine was losing oil, his left aileron was partially severed, and his radio was dead. Any single-engine fighter would have gone down. The Lightning flew home on one engine and landed safely. The aircraft's ruggedness became psychological warfare. Japanese pilots reported shooting Lightnings to pieces, only to watch them fly away. Stories spread through Imperial Navy squadrons of invincible American fighters that could absorb incredible damage and continue fighting. Morale began to crack. But the Lightning's most devastating advantage was one that Japanese strategists had failed to anticipate: range. Traditional fighter tactics assumed that enemy aircraft operating far from base would be low on fuel, forced to engage briefly before retreating. The P-38 carried enough fuel for 4-hour missions, allowing American pilots to loiter over Japanese bases, attacking aircraft during their most vulnerable moments: takeoff and landing. March 9, 1943. Rabaul Harbor. Lieutenant Richard Bong rolled his Lightning into a vertical dive from 25,000 feet, his airspeed indicator climbing past 400 miles per hour as he lined up on a formation of Japanese dive bombers approaching their home airfield. The Aichi D-3A Val bombers were loaded with fuel and ordnance, heavy and slow, committed to their landing approach with no room to maneuver. Bong opened fire at 800 yards, his concentrated armament raking the lead bomber from engine to tail. The aircraft exploded in a fireball that consumed 2 additional Vals caught in the blast radius, 3 kills in a single pass. The remaining bombers scattered, jettisoning bombs into the harbor as they desperately tried to escape the twin-boomed Predator. By March 19, 1943, Richard Bong had achieved 15 victories flying the P-38. His success represented a new type of aerial warfare, where American pilots used superior aircraft performance to dictate engagement terms, striking when conditions favored them and withdrawing when they didn't. The mathematical reality was becoming inescapable. Lightning squadrons were achieving kill ratios that defied Japanese tactical doctrine. The 49th Fighter Group reported destroying 43 Japanese aircraft in March, while losing only 4 P-38s. The 38th Fighter Group claimed 31 kills against 2 losses. Intelligence Summary: Imperial Japanese Navy Combined Fleet, March 25, 1943. American twin-engine fighter demonstrates unexpected combat effectiveness. Recommend immediate tactical revision to counter concentrated firepower and superior performance characteristics. Japanese ace Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, with 87 confirmed victories, wrote in his personal diary about encounters with lightnings that challenged everything he understood about air combat. The American fighters refused to engage in the turning battles, where zero superiority was absolute. Instead, they fought a new kind of war, slashing attacks from superior altitude, hit-and-run tactics that exploited the P-38's speed advantage. They strike like lightning and vanish like ghosts, Nishizawa wrote. Our Zeros cannot follow them in high-speed climbs. When we turn to engage, they are already above us again, preparing another attack. The tropical heat added another dimension to lightning warfare. While Japanese pilots sweltered in unair-conditioned Zeros, American aircraft featured increasingly sophisticated environmental systems. P-38 pilots flew long missions in relative comfort, their effectiveness unimpaired by heat exhaustion that plagued enemy aviators. Personal letter, Lieutenant Charles MacDonald to his parents, April 2, 1943. The lightning keeps me cool even during 4-hour missions. Yesterday, I watched a Zero pilot bail out during combat, not because we shot him down, but because he was overcome by heat exhaustion. Our technological advantages go beyond just firepower and speed. But technology alone didn't explain the lightning's devastating effectiveness. American pilots were learning to exploit every advantage their aircraft provided. They climbed to altitudes where Zeros performed poorly, dove at speeds that Japanese fighters couldn't match, and used their superior range to appear over enemy bases at unexpected times. The psychological impact was becoming as important as the tactical advantage. Japanese pilots began hesitating during encounters with twin-boomed silhouettes, uncertainty replacing the aggressive confidence that had characterized Imperial Navy aviation since Pearl Harbor. Saburo Sakai, whose 64 victories made him Japan's most experienced pilot, encountered a formation of lightnings over the Russell Islands on April 11, 1943. His after-action report described aircraft that seemed to anticipate Japanese tactics, positioning themselves for maximum advantage before combat began. The Americans have learned to fight like us, Sakai observed. They choose when and where to engage. They strike from superior position and withdraw before we can respond effectively. The twin-engine fighter has given them tactical flexibility we cannot match. Death from twin engines. The strategic implications were becoming clear to Japanese commanders. If American fighters could operate freely over any point in the Pacific, Japanese bombers and transports would become sitting targets. Supply lines to isolated garrisons would become death traps. The entire defensive perimeter was becoming untenable. What Japanese intelligence didn't know was that 18 Lightnings were already being prepared for a mission that would demonstrate American reach in the most dramatic way possible. A mission so audacious that its success would shatter Japanese confidence in their ability to protect even their highest-ranking leaders. The man who had planned Pearl Harbor was about to discover that nowhere in the Pacific was beyond American reach. 18 P-38 Lightnings lifted off from Henderson Field at 7:25 a.m. Their Allison engines synchronized in a deadly chorus that would carry Admiral Yamamoto's death warrant across 550 miles of hostile Pacific sky. Below, mechanics watched aluminum specks disappear into morning haze, knowing that success would decapitate Japanese naval leadership in a single coordinated strike. This was the mission that would prove American fighters could reach anywhere, kill anyone, and return home for breakfast. April 18, 1943. Bougainville Strait. The salt spray of whitecaps mixed with the acrid burn of high-octane aviation fuel as 18 Lightnings skimmed 30 feet above wavetops, their twin booms cutting through morning mist like scythes through wheat. Radio silence maintained absolute discipline as the formation navigated by dead reckoning across 600 miles of open ocean, each pilot knowing that navigation errors meant death in the trackless Pacific. Major John Mitchell checked his watch against the mission timeline developed by Navy intelligence analysts who had spent 3 weeks planning this assassination. Operation Vengeance required split-second timing. Intercept Admiral Yamamoto's transport exactly 9:35 a.m. over southern Bougainville. Destroy both aircraft in the formation and withdraw before Japanese fighter escorts could respond. The target was flying predictably. Japanese naval discipline demanded punctuality, and Yamamoto's inspection tour of forward bases followed a rigid schedule that American codebreakers had intercepted and decoded. 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers carrying the Admiral and his staff would arrive over Balale Airfield at precisely 9:35 a.m., escorted by 6 Zero fighters. 18 Lightnings against 8 Japanese aircraft. The numbers seemed favorable, but the mission's success depended entirely on surprise. If Japanese pilots detected the approaching Americans before the attack began, Yamamoto's bombers could reach the safety of Balale's fighter umbrella. Mission briefing notes: Lieutenant Rex Barber, April 17, 1943. Primary target: Betty bomber carrying Admiral Yamamoto. Secondary target: escorting Betty with staff officers. Engagement time: maximum 2 minutes before withdrawal. Failure is not acceptable. At 9:34 a.m., Mitchell spotted 2 dark specks approaching from the northwest, exactly where intelligence had predicted. The Betty bombers flew low over the jungle canopy, their 6 Zero escorts weaving protective patterns 5,000 feet above. Yamamoto's aircraft maintained course and speed, unaware that death was climbing toward them from the morning sun. The architect of Pearl Harbor had 90 seconds to live. Lieutenant Thomas Lanphier rolled his Lightning into a climbing attack. His 4 .50 caliber machine guns and 20mm cannon locked on the lead Betty bomber. At 400 yards, he opened fire, watching his concentrated firepower rake the Mitsubishi from nose to tail. The bomber's right engine exploded in flames, its wing folding upward as the aircraft began its final dive into the jungle canopy. Rex Barber engaged the second Betty, his nose guns stitching destruction along the bomber's fuselage. The aircraft staggered under the impact, trailing smoke and flame as it crashed into the trees below. Both Betty bombers destroyed in less than 30 seconds of combat. The escorting Zeros dove to engage, but the Lightnings were already withdrawing at maximum speed. Japanese fighters couldn't match the P-38s' performance in high-speed climbs, and the Americans vanished into distant cloud cover before enemy pilots could mount an effective pursuit. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was dead, his body discovered in the wreckage of his transport by Japanese search teams the following morning. The man who had planned Pearl Harbor, who had dominated Pacific naval strategy for 18 months, had been eliminated by American fighters operating at the extreme limit of their range. Vengeance complete. The psychological impact on Japanese leadership was immediate and devastating. If American fighters could reach Yamamoto over heavily defended Bougainville, no Japanese commander was safe anywhere in the Pacific. The myth of Japanese invincibility, already cracking under sustained lightning attacks, shattered completely. Personal Diary, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, April 20, 1943. Yamamoto's death proves American reach extends throughout our defensive perimeter. Their twin-engine fighters possess range capabilities we cannot counter. Nowhere is safe. But Operation Vengeance represented more than a single successful assassination. The mission demonstrated tactical capabilities that fundamentally altered Pacific warfare. 18 Lightnings had flown 1,100 miles round-trip, navigated by dead reckoning across open ocean, engaged superior numbers of enemy aircraft, and returned to base without losses. No other fighter aircraft in the world could have accomplished this mission. The Zero's range was insufficient. German Messerschmitt Bf-109s lacked the fuel capacity. British Spitfires couldn't reach the target area. Only the P-38 Lightning possessed the combination of range, firepower, and performance necessary to eliminate Japan's most important naval commander. Japanese intelligence analysts studying the wreckage reached disturbing conclusions about American technological capabilities. The Lightning's twin-engine design provided redundancy that allowed damaged aircraft to complete their missions. The concentrated nose armament created destruction patterns that no Japanese aircraft could survive. Most importantly, the fuel capacity enabled operations at ranges that made nowhere in the Pacific safe from American attack. Flight Petty Officer Saburo Sakai, returning from a patrol over Rabaul on April 22nd, encountered a lone Lightning conducting what appeared to be a reconnaissance mission 400 miles from the nearest American base. The twin-boomed fighter ignored his approach, climbing away at a speed his Zero couldn't match. "They appear wherever they choose," Sakai wrote in his combat report. "Distance means nothing to them. Our defensive perimeter has become meaningless against aircraft that can strike anywhere and withdraw before we can respond." The strategic implications were reshaping Japanese defensive planning throughout the Pacific. Isolated garrisons could no longer depend on air cover from distant bases. Transport aircraft faced interception anywhere within Lightning range. Command structures became vulnerable to decapitation strikes, like the one that had eliminated Yamamoto. American pilots were learning to exploit every advantage their aircraft provided. The P-38's service ceiling of 44,000 feet allowed operations above Japanese interceptor capabilities. Its diving speed of over 500 miles per hour enabled escape from any pursuing fighter. Most devastatingly, its combat radius of over 500 miles brought previously safe Japanese positions within striking distance. Combat Effectiveness Report, 5th Air Force Intelligence, April 30th, 1943. Lightning squadrons achieving average kill ratio of 5.2 to 1 against Japanese fighters. Aircraft availability rate exceeds 85%. Mission completion rate, 94%. Recommend immediate expansion of P-38 production. By May 19, 1943, Lightning squadrons were destroying Japanese aircraft faster than Imperial factories could replace them. The mathematics of attrition were becoming unstoppable. American industrial capacity was producing P-38s at a rate that exceeded Japanese fighter production by 3 to 1. The twin-boomed Hunters were winning, but the Lightning's most important victory wasn't measured in aircraft destroyed or missions completed. It was psychological. Japanese pilots who had dominated Pacific skies for 18 months were learning to fear the distinctive silhouette of twin booms and central nacelle. The hunter had become the hunted. What Japanese commanders didn't realize was that the slaughter had barely begun. The Lightning squadrons operational in April 1943 represented only the first wave of American fighter strength. Hundreds more P-38s were already in production, their pilots training for the campaign that would drive Japanese aircraft from Pacific skies forever. The sky was about to rain fire, and the storm was just beginning. The final Lightning formation swept across Rabaul at noon on November 2, 1943, their shadows racing over empty airfields where once 300 Japanese aircraft had crowded coral runways like metal locusts. Now only bomb craters and twisted aluminum marked the graveyard of Imperial Navy aviation, testimony to 18 months of systematic annihilation by twin-boomed American fighters. The Lightning had achieved total air superiority over the Pacific, transforming Japanese pilots from hunters into prey across 6 million square miles of ocean. August 15, 1943. Wewak Airfield, New Guinea. The acrid smoke of burning aviation fuel mixed with cordite and melting aluminum created a toxic haze that stung the eyes and burned the throat, while Japanese mechanics dragged the shattered remains of Zero fighters into scrap piles that grew larger each day. Flight Petty Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa stood among the wreckage of his squadron, counting 18 destroyed aircraft against the hangar walls, where once 43 Zeros had represented the cutting edge of Imperial Navy fighter strength. The mathematics of attrition had become inescapable. American factories were producing P-38s faster than Japanese pilots could shoot them down. Worse, Lightning squadrons were destroying Japanese aircraft at rates that exceeded replacement capacity by catastrophic margins. Squadron Status Report, Japanese 201st Fighter Group, August 20, 1943. Operational aircraft, 7 Zeros. Pilot strength, 11 remaining from original complement of 36. Fuel supplies, sufficient for 6 days operations. Morale, critically low. Richard Bong climbed down from his P-38 after his third mission of the day. His aircraft's aluminum skin dotted with oil stains and bullet strikes that barely scratched the Lightning's rugged construction. 28 victories now marked his personal scoreboard, each one representing a Japanese pilot who would never threaten American bombers again. The transformation was complete. American pilots who had spent 1942 fighting desperately against superior Japanese aircraft were now hunting enemy fighters with predatory confidence. The P-38 had given them every advantage: superior firepower, better performance, longer range, and technological sophistication that Japanese aviation couldn't match. Lightning pilots were rewriting the rules of air combat across the Pacific. They refused to engage in turning battles where Japanese training provided advantages. Instead, they fought a new kind of warfare: slashing attacks from superior altitude, coordinated formations that overwhelmed individual Japanese fighters, and hit-and-run tactics that exploited the P-38's speed advantage. Major Thomas Maguire rolled his Lightning into a vertical climb above Leh Airfield, his twin Allison engines pulling him skyward faster than pursuing Zeros could follow. At 25,000 feet, he reversed course and dove back into the Japanese formation, his concentrated nose armament destroying 2 aircraft in a single pass before climbing away again. The Japanese pilots below could only watch helplessly as the twin-boomed Predator struck and vanished repeatedly, each attack reducing their numbers while remaining beyond their ability to retaliate effectively. Personal letter, Captain Charles MacDonald, September 5, 1943. Yesterday we encountered 24 Japanese fighters over Rabaul. Our 12 Lightnings destroyed 16 enemy aircraft without losses. The Japanese are no longer competitive in air-to-air combat. Their pilots seem to lack the aggressive spirit that characterized them early in the war. The psychological transformation was as important as the tactical dominance. Japanese pilots who had once pressed attacks with suicidal determination were beginning to hesitate when confronted by Lightning formations. Uncertainty replaced confidence. Fear overcame training. Saburo Sakai, Japan's most experienced fighter pilot with 64 confirmed victories, wrote in his personal diary about encounters that challenged everything he understood about aerial warfare. The Americans had learned to exploit every advantage their superior aircraft provided, turning technological superiority into tactical dominance. We taught them to fight, Sakai observed with bitter irony. Now they surpass their teachers. The lightning gives them capabilities we cannot match. Speed, firepower, range, and ruggedness. They strike when conditions favor them and withdraw when they do not. We have become the students. By October 1943, lightning squadrons were achieving kill ratios that seemed impossible to Japanese intelligence analysts. The 49th Fighter Group reported destroying 87 Japanese aircraft in September, while losing only 4 P-38s. The 38th Fighter Group claimed 63 kills against 3 losses. The numbers represented more than tactical success. They demonstrated industrial superiority that made Japanese resistance increasingly futile. American factories were producing replacement aircraft, and pilots faster than combat could consume them. Japanese aviation was bleeding experienced pilots and irreplaceable aircraft at rates that guaranteed defeat. Combat Assessment, Imperial Japanese Navy Combined Fleet, October 25, 1943. American twin-engine fighters have achieved decisive superiority throughout Pacific theater. Current loss rates unsustainable. Recommend immediate tactical revision and pilot conservation measures. But tactical revision couldn't overcome technological inferiority. The Lightning's twin-engine design provided advantages that no amount of pilot skill could counter. Twin engines meant redundancy when one was damaged. Concentrated nose armament eliminated convergence problems. Superior fuel capacity enabled operations at ranges that made Japanese defensive positions untenable. The strategic implications were reshaping the entire Pacific War. Japanese bombers couldn't operate effectively against lightning interception. Transport aircraft faced destruction anywhere within P-38 range. Isolated garrisons were being starved of supplies as American fighters dominated the skies above critical supply routes. November 11, 1943. Rabaul. The massive Japanese base that had once housed 300 aircraft was being systematically destroyed by lightning-escorted bombing raids that faced minimal fighter opposition. American bombers approached their targets with impunity, protected by P-38 formations that swept Japanese interceptors from the sky. Flight Petty Officer Tetsuzo Iwamoto watched the final evacuation of Japanese aircraft from Rabaul's pockmarked airfields, his own zero among the last 15 fighters capable of flight. Once the most important Japanese airbase in the Southwest Pacific, Rabaul was being abandoned to American bombers whose lightning escorts made effective defense impossible. The fortress had become a tomb. Final transmission, Rabaul Air Operations, November 15, 1943. Base evacuation complete. Remaining aircraft withdrawn to Truk. American fighter superiority absolute. Effective resistance no longer possible. Richard Bong's 40th victory on December 27, 1943, made him America's leading ace and symbolized the complete reversal of Pacific air power. The farm boy from Wisconsin flying a twin-boomed Lightning had achieved more aerial victories than Japan's best pilots, demonstrating that American training and technology had surpassed their teachers. The hunter had become the hunted. The student had surpassed the master. By January 1944, Japanese aviation in the Pacific existed only in isolated pockets, protected by geography rather than fighter strength. The Lightning's 1,000-mile combat radius had brought previously safe positions within American reach. Nowhere was secure from twin-boomed hunters that appeared without warning and vanished before effective response was possible. The sky rained fire and bodies across 6 million square miles of Pacific Ocean. Japanese aircraft that had once darkened Asian skies lay scattered across coral atolls and jungle clearings, their pilots dead or captured, their industrial base unable to replace losses that mounted daily. Final assessment: Pacific Fleet Intelligence, February 14, 1944. Japanese air resistance effectively eliminated throughout Central and Southwest Pacific. Lightning squadrons maintaining air superiority with minimal losses. Enemy aircraft production insufficient to replace combat attrition. Victory achieved. The P-38 Lightning had accomplished what seemed impossible in 1942. The complete destruction of Japanese air power across the world's largest ocean. Twin booms and concentrated firepower had shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility, proving that American engineering and industrial might could overcome any advantage provided by training or tradition. The farmers and factory workers of America had built a fighter aircraft that transformed their sons from desperate defenders into conquering heroes. The Lightning carried them from Pearl Harbor's smoke to Tokyo Bay's surrender deck, twin engines screaming a victory song that echoed across the Pacific for 3 years. The Japanese had jeered at the twin-boomed Lightning. Then the sky rained fire and bodies, and the laughter died forever in Pacific storms.